In the year 1990, Nigel, the Dark Destroyer Benn, took on Chris, simply the best Eubank, in an epic British boxing middleweight showdown, which saw Chris, simply the best Eubank, win by 9th round TKO. Then, after his defeat and coming off a 10-fight winning streak, you saw Nigel, the Dark Destroyer Benn, once again take on Chris, simply the best Eubank, in an epic boxing showdown where he pushed simply the best Eubanks to his absolute limit and ended up inking out a split decision draw. Now, almost 30 years later, you see their offspring, Conor the Destroyer Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. come into the ring and battle out in front of thousands of British fans who are foaming at the mouth for a very nostalgic, epic British boxing showdown. And I am here today to tell you exactly why this fight shouldn't be happening. What's up, YouTube? It's me, Josh from the Average Josh Podcast, coming back at you again with another video. And in today's video, I'm going to tell you straight up why I don't believe that the Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn fight should take place. Now, I like Chris Eubank Jr. I did see him in the Super 6 tournament, and I also do like Conor Benn. He's a very young, athletic, exciting fighter. But with that being said, the reason why I don't think that they should fight is simply because, just like everyone else who's a decent boxing analyst has said, Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, they're just not the same size, and it wouldn't be a competitive fight. Everyone keeps saying size, 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 and so many people keep saying that size doesn't matter. But if you ask a lot of people, they will tell you that size does matter. And I'm not saying that Chris Eubank Jr. or Conor Benn, it isn't a fight that the British boxing fans won't, because the British boxing fans do want it. And I'm not even British, and a part of me would like to see that, because when doing research for this fight, I did go back and I watched the fights with Chris Eubank Sr. versus Nigel Benn, and I really did enjoy those fights. So I can definitely see why the British boxing fans are clamoring for this fight. But the one thing that you have to understand is that Chris Eubank Jr., he's already had his shot at the big time. He's already fought the likes of Billy Joe Saunders, and he's come up short. But Conor Benn, he's an up-and-coming young prospect who still has not yet been tested at the highest level of his weight division. And I think that throwing him in there with someone like Chris Eubank Jr., who, 1, is bigger than him, 2, has more professional experience than him, 3, has better professional experience than him, and then 4, really does like to come in there and fight, and he's a good counter puncher, which is a bad matchup for someone like Conor Benn. Now, Conor Benn, he does have a good boxing style. He has decent fundamentals. He has a good jab. He's super hyper athletic. He's a big puncher at 147, and he's defensively sound. And you see that he can even slip punches pretty well when he's fighting against a fighter who, telegraphs punches, or who he has like a really big gap in talent and athleticism over. You see him slip punches and things like that. But the thing about Conor Benn, similar to how Ryan Garcia was when he initially first started boxing, is that he hasn't really been tested at the championship level yet. I believe his best opponents were people like Chris Van Heeren and maybe Chris Algieri, but he hasn't fought anyone yet who I would consider to be at the top of the welterweight division. And honestly, I don't think he's ready to fight those guys at the top of the welterweight division, because there's a lot of monsters at the top of the welterweight division. You still have Errol Spence there. You still have Terence Crawford there. You still have savvy veterans like Egis Kavalauskas, Sergey Lipinets. And also, you have a lot of these young up-and-coming monsters who are just like generational talents, like Jaron Ennis, and it's looking like Virgil Ortiz is that way as well. and you have other hyper athletic good boxers like Speedy Rashidi Ellis there who he could challenge. So if you're gonna put him, make him go up several weight classes, even at a catchweight, I think they're gonna be fighting at 157 to fight Chris Eubank. Not only are you putting his health in danger because it could be a similar situation to when Kell Brook went up in weight and fought Triple G, and he broke his eye sockets, even though that was relatively a competitive fight. But Kell Brook is a bigger welterweight than Conor Benn is, and I'm not saying that Chris Eubank Jr. is on the same level as Triple G, but he has everything that he needs to really beat up Conor Benn and hurt him and like really put a damage on his career. And I don't think that it's worth doing that just to capitalize on some British nostalgia and get a paycheck. Because Conor Benn, he's a young, talented prospect. I would much rather see Conor Benn move up in competition and fight someone like Sergey Lipinets. And then if he's able to get past Sergey Lipinets, then put him in there with the Igis Kavalauskas. Then if he's able to get past Igis Kavalauskas, then put him in there with a young up-and-coming hyper-athletic fighter like Speedy Rashidi Ellis. Then if he's able to get past Speedy Rashidi Ellis, put him in there with the likes of Jaron Ennis or Virgil Ortiz. And I think that if he fought those guys now, Jaron Ennis, Virgil Ortiz, Errol Spence Jr., Terence Crawford, he would get beaten. But it's only time would tell. You have to give the guy a chance to develop. You have to give the guy a chance to develop before you put him in there with someone who just has a really, really good chance of just mopping the floor with him. Because his chin hasn't really been tested by a big puncher. He's fought some pretty good boxers, but he hasn't fought anyone who's been on his same level of athleticism. And he really hasn't fought on a big stage. Like, he's fought on a big stage, but he hasn't fought on like a really big stage, like going to America and just like fighting on a big stage. And right now, you're putting him on that big stage with Chris Eubank Jr., who also has a style that's catered to him, because Conor Benn has a tendency to, when he's being really hyper aggressive, to like close distance like this, like just quick. But he keeps his guard open when he closes those distances, leaving him susceptible to counters. And when you're fighting someone like Chris Eubank Jr., he's 5'11", almost 6 feet tall, and Conor Benn being 5'8", there's a significant height advantage and reach advantage that Chris Eubank Jr. has. So even though Conor Benn can close those distances very quickly and get off those hard, quick, athletic shots against someone who has that big reach advantage and who's a good counter puncher, that's setting you up to really be set up for a big counter, because you're gonna have his quick athleticism and that momentum going straight for Chris Eubank's strong right hand. And when those two connect, it's gonna be bad. And also, where there's such a discrepancy in size, if Conor Benn's chin, since it hasn't been tested, doesn't pass the test, then what's gonna happen is Chris Eubank Jr. is gonna capitalize on that moment of weakness, and he's really gonna start beating on Conor Benn. Now, like I said, I like Conor Benn and I like Chris Eubank Jr. I just don't think that this fight should happen. And I see why they were doing it, because Conor Benn, even though I think he has some defensive discrepancies that he needs to work on as he moves up in competition, because, you know, I've seen him get, you know, even in that Chris Van Heeren fight in the beginning, I've seen him get like hit quite often, to where if he let a better, stronger, more athletic, more savvy puncher do that to him, it could really put him out. Yeah, even though I've seen those two guys, even though I like those two guys, I just think that this isn't something that needs to happen. I understand why they are doing it, because it could end up boosting both of their careers substantially if it goes well. If someone like Chris Eubank Jr. goes in there and he just does what everyone's expecting him to do, and he just beats Conor Benn in a big fight and it generates a lot of money, he could use that hype to kind of go after some of the top guys in his division. He could use that hype to maybe get a fight with Charlo. He could use that hype to maybe get a fight with Canelo Alvarez. Use that hype to really build on the career that he's trying to build. And if Conor Benn can go in there and miraculously win, which I don't think he will, then it really boosts his career. And then all those people saying that he's not ready for the Spences and the Crawfords and the Virgil Ortizes and the Jaron Ennises of the world, it shuts all them up. And then he says, look, I beat this guy who's much bigger than me. I fought an uphill battle and won. I'm certainly ready for these guys. Because I don't think that that's going to happen, it's more of just like a win-win for Chris Eubank Jr. Get a big fight and get a big payday and ride the hype off of this fight and show the pay-per-view numbers and show the revenue that's built off of it. So with that being said, that's all I really have to say about that. I pray that Conor Benn and comes out of this fight. I pray that he does well in this fight. Even if he doesn't win, I pray that he doesn't get hurt so that he can continue to build his career, because I'm a lifelong boxing fan. I'm 29 years old. I'm at that stage of my life where I just really want to see these young guys come up, the Jaron Ennises, the Conor Benns, the Virgil Ortizes, the Speedy Rashidi Ellises, the Devin Haney's, the Ryan Garcias of the world, because they're the future of boxing. And some of the guys who I've been watching for years, like Chris Eubank Jr., like Errol Spence, guys who are in that age range, they're at their prime about to retire. So I'm just really hoping for the future of boxing, and I don't really want to throw away someone who may possibly be a big part of that future just for a money grab. So with that being said, that's all I really have to say about that, and I'm out.